The first thing I remember is his scream, not the siren, not the machines, just this voice ripping down the hallway. "Are you trying to kill my son?" And for a second, I honestly thought he had to be talking to somebody else because I could not wrap my head around that sentence landing on me. His 5-year-old boy was on the bed behind me, tiny body, jerking lips, turning that awful gray-blue foam at the corner of his mouth. And I was standing there with my hands shaking and a steaming mug of tea on the nightstand, like Exhibit A in a crime scene, you know what I mean. Like the dumbest decision of my life had its own spotlight. Billionaire Carter Hale took the room in 3 strides, grabbed the mug, sniffed it, and when he turned back toward me, his face said everything before his mouth did. "What did you give him? What did you put in that?" And it felt like my brain just left my body. I tried to talk, I really did. He had a fever, he was shaking. My grandma used to make a tea back home, I thought. And he cut me off so hard his voice hit like a slap. You thought you'd experiment on my son? Are you insane? What is wrong with you?" While Noah's little body stiffened again on the bed behind him, making that horrible choking sound that still yanks me awake. I reached for the boy on pure instinct because whatever else I had messed up, I loved that kid, but Carter stepped between us like a wall. "Don't touch him. You've done enough. Don't you dare lay a hand on him again." And when I tried to move around him, he threw an arm out to block me. His shoes hit the spilled tea, my socks slid, and I went down backward into the metal basin I'd filled with boiling water. The basin tipped with me scalding water poured across my arm and shoulder, and the sound that ripped out of me didn't even sound human. He flinched at the scream, but he didn't really look at me. He scooped his son up like he weighed nothing, bolted for the door with his phone already at his ear, yelling for 911 as his footsteps shook the stairs, and I was left on the floor, curled around my burned arm, pressing my forehead into the hardwood, and whispering the only broken prayer I had left. "Please, God, please don't let that little boy die," because I thought I knew what I was doing. My name is Imani, and if you'd told me a year before that day that the internet would one day call me the maid who almost killed a billionaire's kid, I would have laughed because back then my biggest dream was just a steady paycheck and a place without roaches. I grew up in a forgotten town in Alabama, where doctors were something people on TV had, where most problems got met with Vicks, a damp rag, and whatever plants my grandma could coax out of the hard red dirt behind our trailer. So yeah, deep in my bones, I believed in tea and leaves and things you could boil on a stove when you couldn't afford an ER bill. When I moved to Atlanta, I told myself I was done with that new city, new rules, just clean the houses, cash the check, maybe night classes one day. But then I walked into the Hale place, all glass and marble up on a hill, and met a little boy who barely spoke, and slowly those old instincts started creeping back. Carter's wife had died in a wreck the year before, and you could feel it in that house like there was a closed door nobody touched, and Noah had gone quiet with it. The older nanny told me he'd burned through a whole lineup of women who either treated him like a china doll or like a chore, and he shut down for all of them. I wasn't hired to fix his grief. I was there to keep the place from drowning in laundry and dishes, but kids don't care about job descriptions. They care about who looks them in the eye. And I am the kind of person who hums while she scrubs and makes dumb little jokes at 7 a.m. So pretty soon, he was dragging his blanket into the laundry room just to sit on the floor while I sang off key. The first time he followed me out to the backyard, he stood under that huge magnolia with his eyes closed and whispered, "It sounds like the ocean." And that was the first full sentence I heard from him. I just said, "Yeah, baby, ocean with no sand in your shoes." And he gave me this shy, sideways smile that made me want to build a wall around him. That's the kid I made tea for that Tuesday, not some nameless rich kid, but the first child who ever drew a picture of me with a sun over my head and taped it to his wall. So when he woke up, hot cheeks, flushed eyes, glassy, whispering that his head felt big, my whole body went on alert. I took his temperature 102 and climbing texted the house manager, called the fancy pediatric clinic his dad used, and sat on hold listening to fake, cheerful music while his breathing got heavier, finally hung up, and tried again, busy signal, and every beep made my chest tighter because I knew exactly what my grandma would have done back home. I looked at that perfect little herb bed by the fence and told myself I'd just grab something. Gentle lemon balm, mint, nothing wild, just enough to soothe him, till a doctor called back, and I remember standing there holding those soft green leaves and having this tiny flash of doubt. This voice that said, "You don't really know what you're doing," and pushing it down, telling myself, "It looks right, it smells right, that has to be enough." Yeah, that was the moment. I made the tea, added honey, cooled it till it was warm, held it to his lips. He trusted me completely, took a few small sips and laid back down, and for maybe 5 minutes I thought I'd done something good. Then his eyes went strange, his body jerked, and the next thing I knew I was screaming for his father. After the ambulance left, the house felt like a crime scene. Sharp questions, latex gloves, a cop asking me exactly what I'd picked, exactly how much he drank. And later at the station, a detective sliding a picture of a plant across the table. "This is Datura Angel's trumpet. It's toxic. A few leaves can kill an adult. Do you understand what you brewed?" And all I could see was Noah's face going slack. He kept saying the word intent, asking if I understood the difference between an accident and a crime. And I kept saying I loved that boy. I panicked. I was stupid, but I didn't mean to hurt him. And he just wrote his notes because his job was to decide whether the DA should put manslaughter next to my name. I spent that night in a holding cell, burned arm throbbing metal bench, digging into my back, listening to other women cough and cuss and pray. And every time footsteps came down the hall, I thought, this is it. They're coming to tell me he died. When they finally opened the door the next day, the detective just said, "He's in ICU, it's critical, we're waiting on outcome." Which is a neat little phrase that decides whether you walk out of a station or get walked into a courtroom. They released me while they waited, the agency dropped me, my phone blew up with numbers I didn't recognize, and I ended up at a church shelter wrapped in a borrowed hoodie, staring at a stained ceiling and bargaining with a god I wasn't sure was listening. Just let him live, I'll disappear, just let him live. 2 days later, the shelter director knocked and said, "There's someone asking for you." And when I saw Carter in that doorway, rumpled suit, dark circles, no tie, my stomach dropped. I thought he'd come to finish me off. Instead, he said, "He's alive." Voice rough, weak, but the doctors think he's going to make it. And I just sat down and cried because that was the only thing that mattered. Then he pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to me. When I opened it, I saw a crayon drawing. Little stick figure boy holding hands with a taller figure with braids under a huge yellow sun, and at the top, in shaky letters, "Me and Miss Imani." And something in the room shifted, because suddenly it wasn't Billionaire and Maid, it was two people staring at proof that the kid in the middle loved me. We didn't magically become friends in that moment. It wasn't a movie, but we did talk like humans for the first time. He told me about standing outside the ICU doors, listening to machines breathe for his son. Hearing the toxicologist explain that those plants grew wild along his own fence, that somebody with more education could have made the same mistake. And then he said quietly, "You almost killed my boy." And I said, "Yes, sir," because there was no point pretending otherwise, and he added, "But I also know you're the first person who got him to laugh after his mother died," which was the first time he'd said that out loud. Out of his jacket came an envelope, civil agreement, NDA. No talking to the press, No lawsuit over my burned some money to keep me from sleeping on that shelter floor. And one line that mattered more than the rest. If Noah asked for me, I'd be allowed to see him under supervision. I signed without hesitation, not because I felt lucky, but because if that boy woke up and thought I'd just abandoned him, I don't think I could have lived with that. The first time I walked into his hospital room, he looked so small under the wires it hurt to look at him. But the second he saw me, he lit up. "Imani?" he rasped, arms lifting, and I had to bite my lip to keep from breaking down. "Hey, little man, you gave us all a scare," I whispered, and from the hallway glass, I could feel his father watching, not stopping it, not smiling, just trying to figure out what to do with the fact that his son still loved the woman who'd almost killed him. That right there was the twist nobody on the outside expected. The part where the man who had every legal right to bury me under charges chose something else, not because I deserved it, but because his kid refused to let him paint me as a monster. A couple months later, when Noah was home and stronger, Carter asked me to meet him downtown at his foundation office, sleek building photos of kids on every wall, and he said, "We fund school programs, parenting classes, all that we're expanding on the South Side, and we keep sending in people who sound like brochures. It isn't working. Would you think about joining our outreach team?" And I actually laughed. "You want the girl the blogs dragged as a child killer talking to families for you. That's your plan." And he shook his head. "I want the woman who actually understands why a mom will trust her auntie's tea over a doctor, and also knows how bad it can go. You speak both languages." I went back to my little apartment and sat there staring at the wall, realizing I had two options: spend the rest of my life running from my own name or walk straight into the room with it and try to turn that worst day into something that helped someone else. So I called his director back and said yes. Working at the foundation didn't erase what I'd done, nothing ever will, but it let me sit on gym floors with kids and talk about panic and grief and how calling 911 doesn't mean you don't love your grandma's remedies. It just means you're giving yourself more chances, and little by little, it felt like maybe I was building something instead of just apologizing forever. When the story finally leaked and the headlines hit, and strangers online decided I should be in prison, not running programs, I thought hard about quitting, about disappearing. But in the middle of all that noise, Carter pulled me into a conference room and said, "If you still want to do this work, I'm standing next to you." And for once in my life, I believed a rich man when he said something like that. Out of those ugly news cycles came the idea for the Renee Center, named after his wife. A place where kids who've lost someone or lived through something big can get help in rooms that feel more like art studios than clinics' walls covered in drawings instead of beige paint. And somehow I ended up helping run it. On opening night, we had parents in folding chairs, kids reading poems and singing Bad Coffee in the back, and Noah insisted on going up to the mic, climbed onto a tiny step, and said, "Hi, my name is Noah. When my mom died, I stopped talking when I got sick. I almost died. And Miss Imani cried a lot because she thought it was her fault. But she stayed, she didn't leave. And now she helps other kids not be so scared. So I just want to say thank you." Then he turned, looked straight at me, and added, "I love you." And I lost whatever cool I had left. So that's where I am now, somewhere in between villain and saint, which is where most real people live. I was the maid who thought she could eyeball a plant and almost cost a child his life. I was the woman in a cell wondering if I deserved to ever be near kids again. And I'm also the person who shows up week after week to sit on scratched-up floors with other people's children and say, "Here's what panic feels like. Here's how we slow it down. Here's why you make the call." And you can decide if that's redemption or insanity. What I want to know from you is this: if you were in Carter's shoes, would you have pushed for the harshest sentence and tried to forget my name, or would you have done what he did and let your child's love for someone complicated change how you see justice, and if you were me, could you keep walking into rooms where people whisper about you and still offer help, or would you disappear and start over under another name? Tell me in the comments what you think real justice looks like in a story like this. Should someone like me ever get a second shot at working with kids, or is one terrible mistake all it takes to be done forever? Hit like if you stayed with me to the end. Share this if it made you think about second chances differently. And if you've ever seen somebody climb back from a mistake that should have buried them, I'd really love to hear it. I really would.